Welcome back to the WHTC Morning News for this Thursday, November 11th, Veterans Day. And once a month, we have a chance to catch up with Dr. Brian Long. He is the Director of Supply Management Research at Grand Valley State University. Every last 2 months of every month, he canvasses purchasing managers in Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids to comprise his current business trends report. Brian, good morning. And the first thing I will bring up to you is the title of the current business trends for the report released this week. Still flat, but slightly better. What came to that conclusion on that headline for your report this month?
Well, our numbers last month were quite flat, but we picked up a little bit this month. We still obviously have problems with the supply chains around the world, and our people are feeling it in a number of different directions. One, of course, is higher prices, but probably more importantly, the lack of availability. Some of the people say that they have never had to work so hard to get the materials into their company and keep their company going. And so from that standpoint, we are positive, but just a little bit on the positive side. Some of the companies have figured out how to overcome many of these obstacles, and that's why I have to say, bumping along. We would be much stronger if it weren't for all of these supply chain problems right now.
The double whammy, Brian, would be the fact that you have supply chain problems and you have personnel problems, and just not getting enough people to work, or getting enough people to work in some of the industries that these companies need to have people working.
That is a major problem that has actually been going on long before the pandemic. Part of it, of course, has to do with wages, and a third of the people in this survey have indicated that they have increased their wages. Now, I don't know by how much, but they've done what they need to do to attract people. And of course, the signing bonus has become a popular item too, of trying to attract people to the respective companies. But for most of the firms in our survey, they are industrial companies. Their jobs are factory work. One of them actually has a $19 an hour starting rate. But again, it's a factory job. It's an air-conditioned factory for what that counts for. It's not a sweatshop, but still is having difficulty filling even those positions, even though they're offering to pay more than some of the other firms out there right now.
Now, the thing, I don't know, maybe I'm butting heads with an old problem, but if you offer more money and you're trying to retain people, and yet, you're having problems getting the supplies you need, your overhead's going to rise and rise, and eventually that's got to be passed along to the customers or the consumers, and the cost of the goods, in your case, in your surveyor's case, would be higher. And it's just a never-ending cycle of going up and up and up. And sometimes that word inflation comes up pretty easily.
Well, that's that wage price spiral that we've talked about in economics for years. We've gotten kind of spoiled over the last 30 or 40 years, though, that we really have not had a problem with inflation. Inflation has been extremely tame, despite numerous things going on throughout the world. The big inflation occurred back in the 1970s when we went off the gold standard, and inflation just took off and went wild. Now, at that time, we were looking at constantly rising prices for just about everything, and everybody just plain accepted it. And we don't accept that now, and I'm hoping that that will be the trend. But if people do get in the trend of just saying, oh, well, it's always going to be higher the next time I buy it, then the psychology of inflation kicks in, and the Federal Reserve is going to have to come back and revise its policy of saying this is just transient, the inflation that we are looking at right now.
On Tuesday, Brian Long, surging gas prices are pushing a key indicator of inflation. The producer price index rose 0.6% in October, a tenth higher than the figure for September, and the PPI jumped 6.2% year over year. Whether or not this is more for consumers, or in your case, with the purchasing managers you survey, they're feeling it too, probably.
Well, very much so. The problem with the producer price index is it only reports asking prices, i.e., list prices. Almost nobody in the industrial world buys things at exactly list price. They buy them at a discount most of the time, but in the current times, they are enduring, I should say, surcharges of various sorts that the manufacturers are tacking on. That's why our indication of prices is probably a little bit more accurate. I have been doing this survey for almost 42 years now, and the index of prices that we are reporting is the highest it has ever been.
That ties in with what the report from my wire service from Tuesday says, that wholesale prices rising to mark the highest level ever seen, jumping 8.6% from last October. So that reflects some of what you've been saying.
That is probably a more accurate reflection of what is actually happening there in the market. And as I said, if it does calm down like the Federal Reserve thinks it's going to, it will not be a problem. But they keep talking about this whole idea that it's transient. But I keep saying, well, transient for how long? The current indications are that the chip shortage is now going to last into 2023. That means we've got another full year and a couple of months to go before this chip shortage is going to be over. And the same thing is true with other commodities. So we have to come back and say, at what point do we declare that inflation has taken off and it needs to be controlled? And at what point do we say that the Federal Reserve is right, that it is transient? I don't know where that point is right now, except to say that it's a ways out there right now.
You're saying a ways out there, isn't it sooner than later?
Well, I would like to think so, but of course, numerous economists have said that the big problem right now is the disruption in the supply chain. And I don't see anything happening right now. We did have about 700 ships waiting at anchor outside the Los Angeles harbors, and now it's gotten up to 800. The problem is getting worse, not better. And until that problem starts to get better, and that's not the whole scheme of what's going on, but it's just an indicator of what's happened. We're also short truck drivers, and there's no indication that we've got a huge cadre of new truck drivers coming on board. The same is true of what's happening at the other ports, where they are in turn trying to pick up some of this slack. And they say that they don't have the capacity to do much more than what they are doing right now. All of these things together are cause for concern. And yes, I would like to see some action out of Washington right now on trying to mitigate this supply chain situation. If they did, it would probably ease this problem, and we could be looking at prices starting to come back down as early as next summer. But it's going to take at least until next summer, the way I see it right now.
Dr. Brian Long, I don't know whether or not it's something that your respondents would want to get involved with right at this particular point. Maybe they're looking more short term than long term. But the ongoing global warming, climate change convention that's going on in Glasgow, Scotland, it leads some to believe that the way we manufacture items, the way we market items, might drastically change. Do you get that sense at all from your respondents, or is that too much long term and they're more concerned about more of the short term concerns about supply chain and employment and matters such as that?
They are very much thinking more short term on that, because the big problem that we are talking about here is energy and our use of energy and the side effects of whatever that energy produces as far as the environment is concerned. Now, most of our electricity, the biggest portion so far in Michigan, is still produced by coal, although we're rapidly going in the direction of natural gas, which is far, far less polluting. And yes, we are putting up solar panels, and yes, we are putting up windmills, but this is a long-term strategy. This is not going to happen over the short term. The other problem, of course, is that China and India are not on board. This is about 40% of the population. Oh, excuse me. They said that they are on board, but we will believe that when we see it, because they're going to come back to the same problem again. They're going to go ahead and produce, and at some point in time, worry about the environmental consequences later. That's just the reality of the world.
Yeah, you got that right. You got that right, Brian. I'll be honest with you about that. But you got to start thinking. What I'm making right now is great, but 5 years from now, will I be able to still make it the same way, or will it'll cost more because we got to make it a cleaner way? Well, again, that's a long-term matter. All right, crystal ball. We are less than 2 months away from the end of 2021. Do you see any drastic changes from what you're seeing right now based on your survey this past month, Brian? Do you see any major sea changes at the moment, or do you sort of expect the path we're going on right now will still be the path we're on, say, when we talk on January 11th instead of November 11th?
I believe pretty much so. I don't see any major changes happening between now and then. Like I said, the ongoing problems that we have, I don't think are going to be solved unless something happens. The only thing that would really upset our equation is the so-called black swan event, something that we just simply don't see out there. Someone has suggested that the Chinese may decide to invade Taiwan. Well, I suppose that's a possibility, but most of their money is tied up in dollars, and they're not going to do that unless they want to destroy their own wealth. So for that reason, I don't think that's going to happen. But there are other events out there, economic events that could potentially occur, but we just don't know what they are. We certainly didn't see this pandemic coming, and we have not seen other events like this coming that we again call black swan events. For that reason, barring those things happening, we should be on course to go into the new year a great deal like we are looking at right now.
He is Dr. Brian Long, the Director of Supply Management Research at Grand Valley State University. Every month, he canvasses purchasing managers in the Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids markets to comprise his monthly current business trends report. Brian, as always, we appreciate the time. Thank you very much for joining us. Wish you and the family well. And if all goes well, let's do this again in the month of December.
I will look forward to that.